CODEFEND is an exciting new service from Comsec, which basically allows code developers to send the source code up to us. We then work with them to develop some customized rules and then run that through our third generation tool sets that we have to find the vulnerabilities. We then get the human element, which is the big difference to the current tool sets, to then review and make sure that there's no false positives and also capture the 60% of the vulnerabilities that are not typically picked up by the current tool sets. In essence, we'll pick up many more of the vulnerabilities clearly than the tools today, and of course we will do it much more cost effectively. So in our experience, we've actually reduced the cost of security code rewriting by as much as 50%. Basically, it's all the problems. I mean, if you think about any type of unintentional leak that's occurred or any type of breach that's occurred, the malware, the viruses, the worms, all of that has occurred, so those intentional breaches have occurred because there's been a vulnerability in the software. There are very few examples, in fact I'm struggling to think of any, where it hasn't been related to a flaw in the software and application. So it is the fundamental aspect. Getting your code right from the get-go is incredibly important, and then maintaining it beyond that is incredibly important. This is a straight risk question, and the answer simply is there's no 100% guarantees in anything, perhaps maybe with the exception of death and taxes. So there is no guarantee, there's no 100% guarantee. I always usually say to people, if it's too good to be true, then it probably is. But from an application and from a coding perspective, there are so many things that you can do from a developer perspective to minimize the risk that you're going to put your end users to. From an end user perspective, again, it's about trusting the brand, trusting the software, and whether you feel that is a trusted source. Now, there are check marks. These are services where people have ticked and said, they've been through PCI compliance, they've been through code compliance checks, and those can give you a certain degree of certainty that the software has been reviewed. I think there's a combination of all of those factors. We're asked often, how many flaws are out there in applications, and the cynic inside me says, well, actually 100% of all the applications out there have got flaws, because by definition, as soon as an application comes out, people look at new methods of trying to attack that software. Vulnerabilities may be found out after the fact, and that's why you see the big vendors, the Microsoft, the Oracle, Suns, Apples, etc., bringing out patches on a regular basis. Because they find these vulnerabilities after the fact. But for the smaller software houses or the smaller enterprises, quite often it's around the budget and the business focus. We've got to get the product out now, quickly. And therefore they leave security typically to the end. They'll do a penetration test at the end of the product just before it goes launch. And then of course they'll come up with a long list of vulnerabilities which they then clearly can't fix. And they have to make a decision, do we go and launch the product or do we delay? In fact, we had one client of ours that we found so many vulnerabilities through the penetration testing that they actually abandoned launch. So the response to this is really to get security embedded right up front in the design phase. Help your architects, your program managers, developers, your testers understand security, threat assessments, how to do code reviews all the way through the life cycle, so you minimize the amount of vulnerabilities that are found towards the end of the project. Well, there's nothing wrong with patching software after it's released. I mean, clearly, as you release software, you need to have ongoing maintenance. But if you were to abandon all of your testing and say, I'll tell you what, we'll release the code and we've got 1,000 vulnerabilities, and you release them knowing that there's an extremely good chance that software will be exploited before you're able to get the patch out, then you're exposing your end user community to danger. Now, there's always going to be a situation where you have to take a risk-based decision, because there are very few people that are they're going to fix all of the vulnerabilities before launch. But you need to get rid of the high impact vulnerabilities and then make a risk-based decision. But I think it would be irresponsible to launch a product where you know there's a very good chance that you're going to expose your end user community to danger. And in fact, it's a good way of getting out of business quite quickly, quite frankly. I don't think it's a case of saying writing the applications for more platforms is going to make it insecure. There is more challenge. Clearly, if you've got developers that understand Java and .NET, or they understand the Symbian operating system, or the Microsoft Pocket PC environment, etc., then clearly you've got different sort of training programs and paradigms. But the threat assessment, the process you'd go through threat assessment, the code review, using CODEFEND, for example, that understands all of those different language sets, from C+, to C# to .NET to Java, etc., understanding all these different platforms, it's the same process. So actually following those disciplines is not a difficulty. But yes, you just need to be wary that you need to have that left to right training program.